My parents were people who did their utmost to create a happy home for their small family. And we were small. There were my parents, myself, and then getting on for 7 years later, there was my brother. And about 4.5 years later, my sister was born. Unhappily, she only stayed with us for 5 weeks because she died of a heart condition. It was apparently a congenital one. Upset my mother a very great deal. And looking back on it, I always remember one thing she said: nobody else will let me talk about her. They all say we can't go against the will of God, but you let me talk about her. And I thought, oh, I've done something right. You know how when you're a child, you often think that absolutely nothing you do will please your parents, and at other times they never stop praising you. Well, this was one of those times. My mother was the youngest of a family of about 11. And as her father had died the day she was 6 weeks old, she was without a father until actually she was getting on for 6 when her mother remarried. And her second husband was a man who might have been given the prefix saint, because according to my mother and the 2 youngest of her brothers, that's exactly what he was. Obviously, he was a very ordinary man who took his responsibilities as a stepfather very, very, firmly. He wanted to do well by them, so I was always hearing about all the lovely things he did for them. And as I grew, I thought to myself, it's really funny, but you get the impression that that's exactly what a family should be. People who live together, bother about each other's happiness, but at the same time don't spoil them by making them feel they're the only person who cares. But they make them realise they've also got to do their bit in the world, and they also have to be kindly and think of other people's well-being. Certainly I did that. When I think of the animals we had in our family, it was always so interesting. My father took as much trouble over feeding them as he did the humans. And I remember when my husband came to stay after we were married, he was shocked and horrified because he was not used to people in his home on the edge of the countryside bothering a great deal about what animals wanted. They were there to be useful to people, but ours weren't. They were there as our friends. One of the things my mother liked doing was sitting down with me and telling me about, things that her family had done when she was young. And she would say, oh, we were a happy family together. We bothered about each other. And I found myself wondering sometimes, were there families where people didn't bother about each other? And when I got older, my mother took me one day to a place in London, on the edge of the city of London, and she took me into a long hall with lots of forms all the way along it. There were 2 rows going right up the hall from back to front. And she told me that in the past, a girl had sat at the end of each form and all the others behind her, and then somebody would stand at the front, tell the girls at the end something, shout at them all very loudly and insist that they listened properly and got it right, and then they had to go along the form and tell the others. They told the one next them, and that one told the next, and so on, what the lesson was for today. I was really astonished when I heard that. Then I heard about where my mother went to school. It was a church school. She loved that, and she was immensely proud of it. It was called St George's, and I used to think, oh, I do wish it was called something different, because I don't know why it is. I've never liked the name George. I've always thought it was hard and miserable. Always makes me think of unpleasant things. When I got older, I realised it was because, obviously, although I'd forgotten it, but I'd obviously heard people say, oh, the Georges came in when all our natural-born kings died, and there were none of them left, and one of them went away to the continent to live. That was James the 7th and 2nd, and 7th of Scotland and 2nd of England, and he went off, and so we were left with all these Hanoverian Georges who took over. And I suppose that's why I didn't like it.